Hey friend, welcome back to the Vision Driven Health Podcast, the go-to show for creating healthy habits that last in partnership with the God who created you. Now is the time when cutting carbs, going gluten-free, getting rid of dairy, going carnivore, doing the Daniel fast, and all the other kickstart diets are in full force. I love that my church kicks off each new year with a 3-week fast. It's up to the individual on what they feel led to fast. It could be social media, it could be anything, but naturally, it's usually foods that end up being chosen for what's eliminated, which honestly, I think is great. It's biblical and God calls us to do it. And I'll say right here at the start, eliminating certain foods has its biological benefits in addition to the spiritual. And depending on how you do it or what you're taking out, there can also be drawbacks. The biggest issue that I see is how people transition from those kinds of plans, diets, and fasts. Today, I'm covering how different elimination diets affect you, how to do them well, and how to transition off of them to take advantage of them to the fullest for continued health and well-being. Do you find yourself struggling to consistently implement healthy habits? Do you lack energy, confidence, and motivation because of stress, overwhelm, and shame for having not gotten it together by now? Friend, there is hope and grace for your health. Hey, I'm Robin Ryan McDonald, host of the Vision Driven Health Podcast. I'm a follower of Jesus, a wife, a mama of 2, and a seminarian turned health coach. And I'm so excited that you're here. I found myself in my early 20s captive to cravings and convenience, 20 pounds heavier, super tired, with a face full of acne. I could not figure out how to maintain healthy habits until I discovered the power of aligning my choices with God's vision. 10 years and 2 kids later, by the grace of God, I'm still prioritizing my health and feeling amazing. If you are over quick fixes and are ready to feel good in your own skin, then grab a giant water bottle and let's dive on in. As a reminder, the Vision Driven Health Podcast is under the umbrella of Naval Health Incorporated. The content on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended for medical advice. It does not take the place of medical advice or treatment from a physician. Listeners should consult their own doctor or a qualified healthcare professional for specific health concerns and questions. I just went through my 5-day sugar fast guide and I was like, man, this resource is legit. It's been a couple years since we made it, and looking at it again, I can't help but want to try and get it in the hands of more people. If you haven't heard me talk about it before, this is a free 40-page PDF that goes over the spiritual and biological aspects of fasting. It guides you step by step on how to prepare for the 5-day sugar fast, explaining different approaches and who they are best for. It has the 5 days of devotionals that draw you in to focus on God and lean on Him through the fast. It has tons of recipes for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks that you can use while you're on the fast. And then there are printable memory verses you can print out and cut out. There's next steps. Seriously, if you want to bring God into your health journey, this is an incredible resource. Get it for free at visiondrivenhealth.com/sugarfast. To start, when I say elimination diet, I mean any eating plan that is intentionally eliminating a specific food or foods. I've got 2 primary points I want to drill home today that I think really make or break whether any kind of elimination diet benefits you long term. The first is you really want to make sure that whatever adjustment you're making is being done well. Now, I'm pretty sure I've shared this story before, but the ultimate disaster of a short-term diet change happened a couple years into Ryan and I's marriage. We had been convinced that we should try raw vegan for 30 days. I'm just going to say, that is definitely one of those diets where you have to know what you're doing. For those who aren't familiar, raw vegan is where you eat only plants, no meat, no dairy, and no eggs, and all the plants you eat are not cooked. So instead of being able to have grilled mushroom and some roasted potatoes, you'd have to have raw mushroom, and some apples or some other carb. Now, my husband is 6'5" and just generally large. Like he sits around 250 to 260 pounds at a healthy weight. At the time, we were doing CrossFit every day, which requires adequate nutrition to recover and honestly to just survive. Well, long story short, Ryan made it 9 days into this 30-day raw vegan experiment and ended up having some super intense panic attacks. He couldn't sleep. There was times where he felt like he couldn't stand, where he felt like he couldn't sit. He could not drive. Seriously, I did not recognize the man that was in front of me when he was in that state. So we decided to have him stop the diet and get some chicken noodle soup from Whole Foods. I don't think we necessarily thought that it was the diet, but we were just like, you know what, this isn't helping. He's having a hard time. Like, let's get him some normal food. And literally like a light switch, my husband was back. He got some other cooked meat-based protein in him, and as the day went on, he was finally able to just get some relief. Now, he did end up battling those panic attacks for a few months after that, though, and it really messed with his body and a lot with his head because he kind of had to deal with the fear of, oh no, is this happening again? Now, I'm personally not a fan of vegan, especially raw vegan. I know some vegans who do the diet well for what it is, but that's because they know how to supplement in order to ensure their body gets what they need. Now, I think that diet was just not a fit for Ryan. Doing CrossFit, being 250 pounds, and trying to get all that you needed through zucchini noodles and ground up cashews or whatever we were eating just wasn't going to cut it. But I just kind of think it's weird to advocate for a diet that requires you to take certain supplements because the food you're eating doesn't provide your body with what it needs. Now, to be clear, I take supplements myself. I actually take a lot of supplements. But if I didn't, my body wouldn't be deficient. It just wouldn't be optimal. Whereas with vegan, if you don't take certain supplements, your body will be deficient in certain key nutrients if you only eat the permitted foods. But I'll digress from that. So that's kind of an extreme example, but I share it because there isn't a significant shift in diet that doesn't have an effect on your body. Sometimes that effect is good. Sometimes it's not so good, like in Ryan's case. There are also times when it should have a positive effect, but the implementation prevents you from reaping the benefits. For example, say someone decides to go gluten-free. If they do it because they think it's healthier, yeah, it can have its benefits. If they do it because they actually have an allergy, even more benefits because by eating it, their body's responding negatively. But what can happen with something like gluten-free, which can also happen with like going dairy-free or doing vegan, is that there are so many alternative options. There are gluten-free donuts, gluten-free cookies, gluten-free pizza, gluten-free bread. You don't actually have to eliminate some of the more higher glycemic, meaning those foods spike your blood sugar. You don't have to eliminate those foods to be gluten-free. You don't really have to stop eating processed foods to be gluten-free. So someone can think that they're following gluten-free very strictly, and technically they would be, but they're still over-consuming processed foods and refined carbs, and they're under-eating what their body actually needs in protein, fiber, and healthy fats. Or even for a healthier, more encompassing diet like Whole30 or strict paleo, which are kind of the same thing, but someone can still come up with they can come up with all the Whole30 approved alternatives, again, things like cookies, brownies, etc., and then miss out on getting their macros and portions dialed in. Now, generally, on a Whole30 or paleo plan, you're going to feel better because those diets demand a clean approach to eating. It's literally just whole foods. But if the goal is weight loss and you don't have those macros dialed in, then it can still get stifled, which if you do want some more details on macros, be sure to check out, I believe it was 2 episodes ago, where I talked about exactly how to calculate the macros that you need for your body. So then there's keto and carnivore. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of elimination diets. I'm just kind of highlighting some more popular ones and ones that I hear more people doing. But I think both keto and carnivore have the potential to be super great. They're lower glycemic, which again means they don't spike your blood sugar significantly. They are usually sufficient in protein, obviously carnivore more than keto, but you can have as much protein as you want on keto, so usually that's not an issue. And there's actually some really cool research on the benefits of keto, which carnivore is actually technically keto. But there's some research on eating these kinds of diets and how they benefit fighting cancer, reversing diabetes, slowing down or reversing dementia, and a variety of other chronic illnesses because of how non-inflammatory these diets are. And primarily because it's just much more difficult to dramatically spike your blood sugar and to do so repeatedly on those diets. I think what a lot of people don't realize too is that with those diets, you're getting all the nutrients that you need if you are doing a variety of different cuts of meat. On keto, you have a little bit more flexibility on where you can get your nutrients from. But on carnivore, what people really don't realize is that even a steak, especially if you're getting into the organ meats, there are all of your essential nutrients, everything that your body needs right there. And as much as I'm totally a fan of vegetables, I do think certain ones actually are more toxic for us than others, which is another discussion. But people kind of think, oh, nutrients come primarily or only from vegetables, when the reality is if you're getting quality cuts of meat, you are getting the big movers that are important for your health from the meat. And especially too when it comes to energy, making sure that you have those B vitamins, making sure that you're getting enough protein. Again, that's coming from the meat. Now, the big challenge with keto and carnivore is how to transition off of them without swinging to the opposite side of the pendulum once you hit your goal weight or you complete whatever timed thing that you're doing. I don't think I know anyone who has done either keto or carnivore for more than a year, maybe even consecutively, but I might be able to think of someone who did it for a full year. But even still, that's not actually that long. And I don't think that I know anyone who's done that who didn't gain back a lot of the weight they lost from doing that. Now, I don't think it's the diet's fault. Like I said, I've obviously said a lot of good things about these diets. I think they have a lot of great benefits. I think it's just a matter of having the right support and strategy moving forward. And even though a diet might be good and beneficial, if it's treated like a diet from the mentality standpoint, where it's like, okay, I'm eating healthy and following all the things. Okay, now I'm not. So it's just, free for all. Or even to the like, oh yeah, I'm going to try and maintain this, but there isn't enough structure, there isn't enough clarity on what it looks like to integrate the other foods. It just kind of becomes this like slow progression back to where you started. And this leads me to my second point. When you're doing any kind of elimination diet, if you plan to ever consume the food that you're eliminating again, you want to make sure you have a clear vision and the right resources and info to transition from whatever you've chosen to do in such a way that you will progress in your healthy habits and not fall back into even more harmful patterns. So, how do you do that? The first thing you need to ask yourself is, do I honestly and truly be honest with yourself? I've heard it many times. Oh, I don't even crave sweets anymore. I'm never going back. I've totally lost my desire to indulge. Which, yes, that does happen. And that is actually a very common experience for people who do diets like keto or carnivore. But it doesn't take much of a reintroduction to certain foods to completely go back to those original struggles. So what I'm saying is you have to ask yourself honestly if you think you'll be eating the foods you gave up for that diet again in the future. And if the answer is yes, great. That's not a bad thing at all, honestly. For most people, that is the case. Whether they think they will or not, they usually will partake of the foods that they hadn't eaten prior. So then the really important question is, what do I want my relationship with that food to look like? Now, for many people, when they do an elimination diet, that the food they eliminated was a problem. Oftentimes that is the sweets, or it's bread, or it's cheese, or processed food, takeout, whatever. And it was something that you craved. It was something you felt like you couldn't keep in the house without overindulging in. It was something you prioritized over cooking healthy meals at home. So for this portion, I do encourage you to sit with God and ask him, is there any idolatry that was kind of feeding into those patterns where food or the comfort of those foods or the convenience of those foods was being placed above the grace available to you to do what's healthy for your body, to steward your body. And I'm not here to tell you that that's what the case was. You get to ask the Lord and have him convict if that's what your situation is. There could also be trauma from your past where maybe you had friends, maybe you had a mom or a mother-in-law or somebody in your life, could be a dad too, I'm not trying to say it's only women, but somebody in your life made you become hyper-focused on what you eat or told you not to eat certain things. And so, or maybe there's just a really stressful situation that you're going through and somehow food has become your comfort in that, right? There's something there that needs to be healed. There's something that needs to be broken off. So if there's anything spiritually that had you in that place where you didn't have control, you weren't able to make decisions from a grounded, spirit-led place when it comes to your eating, you want to ask the Lord to reveal that to you. Because if you're in this place where biologically you've kind of reset your taste buds, you've reset your body because you've done this elimination diet, it's super important to make sure that you've dealt with all the spiritual things with the Lord before you start to introduce those foods back in, because even more likely you'll be to end back where you were. So, and just, this is something, again, that's going to be individual to each person. And from there, you want to get super clear. What is that going to look like moving forward? What does it look like specifically? And just to kind of give you my own experience as an example, I was 100% addicted to sugar and refined carbs. I could put down a half pound of yogurt covered raisins, which is like sugar upon the sugar of the sugar, in one sitting. And this was largely when I was in college, and I was trying to track calories. I was concerned about my weight and whatnot. And I would purposely not eat very much during the day so that I could save all my calories to go crazy on tons of desserts at night. And I was just constantly thinking about when I'd be able to have another treat. I'd even associate certain classes with what treat I get to eat, because I would, go to whichever little mart and I'd get the muffin, or I'd get the cookie, or I'd get I would get sushi, which the kind of sushi that I got didn't even have real meat. It was the fake crab. It was the California roll or whatever with the rice, which was literally just straight carbs. And so, or I would get there was a variety of things that I get, the sugary latte, whatever it was. And I just would associate certain classes with getting those things. And it was a mental thing. It was a craving thing from a biological standpoint. And it was probably an addiction. I ended up learning the negative impact sugar really has on your body. And it honestly took me a while to really shift into, I think, an awareness regarding sugar. Because everyone knows that sugar isn't good for you. You could ask even a little kid. You can ask almost any person, say, hey, is sugar good for you? And they're going to say, no, it's not. But I think it's a learning curve to be able to identify how much we have it in a standard American diet. It's not just in cookies and muffins and things like that. It's actually hiding in a lot of products that we just think is normal. I grew up having cereal every morning for breakfast. Yeah, I think it's becoming much more clear to people now that is a sugary start to the day. But when I was younger, I remember, sitting there reading the cereal box while I'm eating it, and it's essential vitamins to start your day. Part of a balanced breakfast, were all the commercials, and which the balanced breakfast was the cereal, toast, orange juice, and just ridiculous carb mess that doesn't set anybody up for a good start to their day from a health standpoint. And so things like that, or even Prego pasta sauce has a ton of sugar added to it, or salad dressings for I'm going to have a salad. Okay, but the salad has a sugary dressing and craisins and apples and all this sugar in it with sometimes no protein at all or very little protein. And so you're actually just eating a very high glycemic, crunchy water situation that you didn't have to eat, because if you were trying to eat it to be healthy, you could have eaten something different. You could have eaten a hamburger and a cheeseburger or a burger or whatever and had a healthier experience than that super high glycemic, seed oil infested salad. So with that said, it took me a while to identify what I was eating that was actually compromising my health. And I think also, and maybe this was just my experience, but I never thought that I was the one overeating sugar. I never thought that I wasn't unhealthy. I did try to eat healthy even though I wasn't. I was trying. I was active. I worked out. I played sports. So I knew that I had that part, going for me. But all that to say, the more I learned about it, the more I started to make little changes and realize where I could make those adjustments. So I started to find healthy alternatives. A lot of that was cooking my own things at home. Part of that was brought on once I was out of the on-campus living situation and I was living in apartments. I had to it was cheaper just to cook my own food than to eat out. And I couldn't keep living off of the Del Taco value menu. So I started to try and prioritize more protein. I used discipline to put boundaries around when I would have sweets or treats. I kind of started to ask myself, like, is this something I need to have multiple times a day? Like, can I wait until later in the day? Can I, wait, or can I minimize how much I have? And kind of started to experiment with that. And I ended up creating a new standard and ultimately a new relationship with indulgent foods. And as it stands right now, I have no problem eating a donut or going out to eat or grabbing some pizza or whatever. But I've also been super spoiled with quality, satisfying foods to the point where I just, and I feel really good eating what I eat. So when I do have a donut, I'm going to say I'll have a couple bites. Or if I do go out to have pizza, I'm going to have 1 or 2 slices. And it also depends on the place too, because some pizza places, I know if I eat there and I can have a few slices and I'll feel fine afterwards. There's other ones where even after 1 slice, I'm like, oh. So, I'm at the point where I won't necessarily have very much. And it's not because at this point that I'm denying myself. It's actually because I genuinely don't want to eat it. I've just learned that after the second bite of donut, the delight erodes with every additional bite until I just end up feeling like trash. And I've learned that the extra slice of pizza will make me feel bloated and uncomfortable and less engaging if I'm hanging out with friends. And it's taken a lot of learning and a lot of practice and a lot of being intentional with being in tune with my body and drawing connections between how I feel in the moment, the next day, a few hours later, and what I eat. And which just required a lot of learning and practice, which I think for you as well, it's going to take learning and it's going to take practice. But I do hope that by listening to this podcast and this episode, I can help condense the time on that for you, because it probably took me a good 7 years or so to kind of figure things out. So I'm going to use 2 examples of different elimination diets that I think are pretty common and or popular, and kind of talk through how you can transition from them in a healthy way and move forward with healthy habits. And the 2 that I'm going to pick are cutting out sweets, and the other one will be doing carnivore. So these 2 do overlap because carnivore, you're not having sweets, but I think there's a lot more to coming off of carnivore than there is in reintegrating sweets. So to start out, we'll start with cutting out sweets. And so let's just say, you're all done with whatever period of time that you've said you're not going to have sweets, and now you're quote unquote allowed to go back and eat them again. I do encourage you to consider even just that language of what you're allowed versus not allowed to do. And kind of the diet mentality that's behind that. But the first thing you want to do is, again, get clear on your relationship with sugar, with sweets, and then really decide okay, what is this going to look like? And maybe for you that looks like, all right, I want to have control over them. I do not want to feel like I'm just impervious to the temptation of sweets, that I have to have it. I don't want to feel like I need them throughout the day. I don't want to be dependent on them. I don't want to think about them all the time, but I also want to be able to enjoy them without any weird over-restrictive feelings about it. Now, I think honestly that would be a great way to define your desired relationship with sweets. Might sound impossible, but it's not. So then from there, you would get to experiment with what that looks like. So you might decide, okay, well, I haven't had sweets for, maybe if you did the 5-day sugar fast, it'd be 5 days. If you did a longer fast, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. But you could decide, all right, since I haven't had them for a while, maybe I try just having them once a week. And then I work up to 3 or 4 times a week. And you can decide, maybe if you want to have it every day, But I would say like make it gradual. See how difficult it is. See how much you think about it. See how your body feels, and really continue that process. Just because you're done, with whatever thing you said you were going to do, and you're quote unquote allowed to have the sweets, doesn't mean you have to just go back to eating them again. You can like have an off ramp from that process, or an on ramp, I guess you could say, back to sweets. So then you want to decide what kinds of sweets you're going to have. Will you go back to the super processed options that you ate and didn't give a second thought about? Are you going to try and make some healthier versions? Maybe you've got some favorites. You're like, okay, but I do love chocolate chip cookies. And so you find a cleaner recipe that has a little bit less sugar, that when you eat it, you're like, this still tastes great to me. Are you going to try and find it? You're like, no, Robin, I don't really want to experiment with healthy alternatives. That's totally fine. There are healthy versions at health food stores that you can, try as well. You get to decide, what's it going to be for you? Are you going to use this as an opportunity to kind of make a new standard for yourself of what sweets you're going to bring back in? Can you, and really, I would encourage you to use whatever, elimination experience you had to try to find something that works for you, that doesn't cause you to have to go back to what is not serving your body well, even if you do have it occasionally. It's not all treats are equal. They're not all without consequence. Some are more harmful than others. So to summarize that, for the sweets, decide what your relationship with the food is. Decide what that looks like specifically regarding the frequency of reintroducing the sweets. Get detailed. Then even, you can make like a plan and write it all out, put the dates and everything. Then decide what you will actually eat. And then just see if you can't create a new standard for yourself that feels good, that doesn't feel like you're still in a restrictive mode, that just feels like, and you could say like, my intention was to have, a sweet tomorrow, but I was hanging out with my friend. She wanted to go get, some ice cream, or she wanted to go to a coffee shop, and I decided I'll do that today and I'll just adjust moving forward. And, to have that mentality of like, you're flexible, it's not going to derail you, it's not going to stress you out, is really where you want to be. And that's the sweet spot where you're in control and you're coming from an intentional place. Okay, so now let's talk about carnivore. It can be kind of similar. You want to start out by deciding what you want your relationship with food to look like and what you want to eat moving forward. If you've enjoyed having extra energy and feeling super good, which most people do experience on carnivore after they get over the initial hump, I can tell you that you're feeling that likely for these 3 main reasons. Number 1, you're not consuming processed foods. Even if you're going out to eat and ordering meat, that meat is far less processed than anything else on the menu that you used to order. Number 2, you're not consuming high glycemic foods. Literally, it's completely eliminated. Anything that is going to spike your blood sugar significantly is not an option because you're not having any carbs. Unless you're doing kind of, I guess, the more, I don't even know how they define it, but there is a version of carnivore that they will have like dates or honey or a few tropical fruits or something like that. But either way, you're primarily sticking with things that are not going to spike your blood sugar excessively or repeatedly. Number 3, you're getting lots of protein and you're actually getting a lot of B vitamins. And so if you want to continue to feel that extra energy and continue making progress in your health, you'll want to focus on those 3 things as you reintroduce other foods, right? So processed food, high glycemic foods, and protein. So that means staying away from eating out frequently. Eating out isn't just that the food's processed. You might eat out and you're like, oh, well, I just got chicken and broccoli or whatever. But unfortunately, there are very few restaurants that do not use seed oils, that do not have just additives and things that they put in the food that is what contributes to your body not feeling so well otherwise. So the more you can cook at home, really it does make a big difference. So you are going to want to try to cook as much whole foods as you can in your own kitchen. You're going to want to continue to reduce your grain consumption, especially processed grains. So that's like anything with flour or corn products. And then you're going to want to ensure that you're continuing to prioritize protein. Those would be my suggestions, at least kind of shifting into that for a period. And then you can kind of maybe then consider the on-ramp that I just explained for the sweets, where maybe you do want to include some more of those things that have some flour and whatnot. But I think it's super important to find a baseline diet that you know you will want to continue long term. Most people aren't going to be carnivore for forever. So similar to the sweets off-ramp, this will be a little bit of trial and error, with coming off of carnivore. But if you can get super clear on your vision and ground that in some deeper meaning, it's going to make all the difference. So for example, and this applies to any kind of elimination diet that you're coming off of, but you could say, okay, well, I want to have a healthy relationship with sweets, or I want to continue cooking whole foods at home. And then you would say, because this enables me to put God first and have the health I need to do what he's called me to do. Use your own reasoning, your own language for that. But I do encourage you to consider how your health, how what you're eating does directly tie into your walk with the Lord and your calling. So keeping that at the front of your mind is going to make all the difference as you land on a way of eating that propels your health forward and supports you for decades to come. So friend, that's what I have for you today. Just emphasizing all the questions, the intentionality, the things that really don't always get considered or written down or emphasized when coming off of a diet that if you do actually spend the time to think about those things, can set you up to have a really intentional, healthy lifestyle moving forward instead of the very common slide back into those unhealthy habits. So my hope and desire for you is that you will move forward and you will be able to find a healthy lifestyle, a healthy routine, a healthy rhythm that feels good to you, that again, doesn't feel restrictive. You've done the work with the Lord where there's no idols, there's no hurt, there's no trauma. All of that is just free and clear that you can have this freedom-based, spirit-led, healthy lifestyle. So if you like this episode, please share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, please sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes here on the Vision Driven Health Podcast. I'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much for listening to the Vision Driven Health Podcast today. I hope this episode inspired you, supported you, and blessed you in some way. If it did, it would mean the world if you would leave a 5-star written review on Apple Podcast and share this episode on your social media. The more reviews and shares this gets, the more people can be blessed and encouraged in creating a Jesus-centered, sustainable, healthy lifestyle. If you want to hang with me and other Jesus-loving ladies who are creating healthy habits that last, be sure to join my free Facebook group, the Made Well Mastermind. Use the link in the show notes to join. Be blessed with hope, joy, and health. I'll see you next week. Again, the Vision Driven Health Podcast is under the umbrella of Made Well Health Incorporated. The content on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended for medical advice. It does not take the place of medical advice or treatment from a physician. Listeners should consult their own doctor or a qualified healthcare professional for specific health concerns and questions.